Teaching Strategies for Independent Learning in the General Education Classroom. Catherine Bentley for Dr. Valerie Zelenka, Class TEEL 859. Encouraging and supporting students. Let's start with defining a few key elements. Teachers must foster student self-awareness and awareness of one's own personality or individuality. Student self-advocacy. Students can identify supports needed to succeed and communicate the information effectively to others, including teachers and employers. And student self-determination, the ability to make decisions and direct behavior so that the desired goals are achieved. In self-advocacy training, students must learn their strengths and weaknesses in performance and skills to communicate their needs positively and efficiently. Students cannot be scared to stand up for themselves, and they cannot be scared of asking for help. If you as a teacher see students persistently struggling when expectations are higher, evaluate when and why the child is suffering in class. Are they scared of failure? Scared of asking for help? If a pattern arises that you can see, alert special education teachers, and also talk with the child about ways to overcome the problem. If the child is scared of failure, then he can politely ask for a break instead of having an emotional outbreak or tantrum. If the child is scared of asking for help, thinking it might make them look stupid or something like that, ensure them that it is okay to ask the teacher or another student for help, unless it's like a test or a standardized state test. Of course, one of the best ways to help students with self-awareness, self-advocacy, and self-determination is to teach them to do their work on their own, independently. Giving them the learning tools to be able to do so is one way of doing this. If a child can do their work independently, then their self-worth, independence, and confidence will be boosted. How do teachers teach independent learning strategies to students? To teach an independent learning strategy, first identify the problem area, and then identify whether it's an individual or a group problem. Then select successful strategies to be taught to the class. Explain how that strategy can help in academic and life tasks. Administer a pretest to see how these students do. Demonstrate strategy use using a whole lot of verbal content whenever you're teaching it. Encourage students to memorize the strategy steps. Provide guided independent practice, and administer post-test to see if these students actually truly learned the learning strategy. If more severe levels of teaching the individual learning strategy are required for students to successfully learn and utilize the method, co-teaching or Tier 2 or Tier 3 interventions can be implemented. When demonstrating a learning method, as I said, be sure to vocalize each step in simplest terms. A lot of these individual learning strategies are given in mnemonics, so it may help to first have the children remember the word alone and then add in the steps and more definition. And some students, i.e. maybe ones with learning disabilities, may need a copy of the mnemonic with steps placed in their binders or classroom journals. In guided practice, walk students through each step as they practice on their own. And in independent practice, monitor students and ask them questions to guide them in the right paths. There are multiple strategies that Friend highlights. One is using controlled materials at students' reading levels and interests that are free of complex vocabulary and concepts. Two is giving feedback that is specific and encouraging students to evaluate themselves, like asking questions, how do you think you did? Or what do you need to focus on next time? Three is praise students only when their work is worthy of that praise. And four is encouraging students to take responsibility for their successes and failures. If post-tests indicate that more practice is required, students can receive extra help in large or small groups with a co-teacher, a special education teacher, or in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 intervention group. Are some word ID and reading fluency strategies to be used in class? For starters, to use these strategies, students must know vowel sounds, suffixes, and prefixes. So one strategy is to first separate the words into prefixes, root suffixes, and vowel sounds, then say the parts of the word, and then say the parts fast, and then make it a real word. And whenever that student becomes comfortable in doing that first step, you create the second step, which is just simplifying the first step, and it's looking for different word parts, saying word parts, say word parts fast, and make it a real word. So the only difference really is that you don't separate the word out first. WARF, widen your eye span, avoid skipbacks, read silently, and flex your reading rate. Helps students who are reading at third grade level or higher, but need to increase or adjust their reading speed depending on reading purposes. WRF allows for focus on word meaning rather than word ID. And students are taught to skip articles, the and a, for example, and auxiliary words, such as is and are, to focus on meaningful words. What are some vocabulary strategies? Students will not always be able to ask teachers what the meaning of a word is, so teaching them one of these strategies for vocabulary learning is very important. And it may also help to make a journal or something of that effect for new or common word parts that they will encounter as well. And it's important because, as I said, children will not always be able to ask a teacher, but if you teach children to ask other students, this may also help. So vocabulary strategies include teaching students to know common word part meanings, such as morphemes, root words, prefixes, and suffixes, break words into prefixes, suffixes, and root words, look for context clues in the text around an unfamiliar word, and come to the conclusion for meaning of an unfamiliar word based on its meaningful parts and context clues. Let's move along into reading comprehension strategies. It's important to know that there are several reading comprehension strategies to choose from, and teachers must play a part in selecting the strategy that they believe will be the most helpful to their particular set of students. Which strategy will help the individuals needing help? Which strategy will help children the most for the teacher's specific class? Reading comprehension strategies are helpful for older children, like middle and high school children, in meeting more stringent reading demands of content areas. So the first one that we'll discuss is TWA and plans. Think before reading, think while reading, think after reading, and pick goals, list ways to meet goals, and make notes and sequence notes. TWA and plans aid students in both reading strategies and writing skills. PARS is good for younger students who do not have any experience with other textbook reading strategies, but may not be as ideal as others for older students. And PARS stands for preview material, ask questions, read the chapter, and summarize the main ideas. Posse is a good strategy that also promotes student self-monitoring and stimulates students' background knowledge. Posse stands for predict ideas, organize ideas, search for structure, summarize main ideas, and evaluate understanding. SLIC is a learning strategy to be used for those students who have difficulty understanding pre-recorded textbooks, such as audiobooks and that sort of thing. SLIC stands for set it up, look ahead, comprehend, and keep it together. Scroll is a good strategy for students to use that enables them to take notes while they are reading and to use text headings to aid comprehension and remembering important text information. This could be an excellent choice for students in a higher level science or social studies class, as the strategy allows for note-taking as well as reading comprehension. Sets 3 through 5 should be employed every time they encounter a section with headings in the text they are reading. Notes taken in the scroll method allow further text comprehension as well as a useful study tool. Highlight it and mark it strategies can be employed to further help students with the R step. Scroll stands for survey headings, connect, read the text, outline, and then look back. These are not all the reading comprehension strategies, but a few that were presented by Friend. Moving ahead into the listening and note-taking strategies. In these learning strategies, it's important to note, assist all students in learning more successfully from teacher lectures, and many will also result in students having notes that they can further use for study. Slant, sit up, lean forward, activate thinking, name key info, instruct the talker, is designed to have further student involvement in class, increasing the chances of students listening and taking better notes. Tassel, try not to doodle, arrive to class prepared, sit near the front, sit away from friends, end daydreaming, and look at the teacher, is excellent for older students who have difficulty maintaining attention. So this one may be employed for students with disabilities such as ADHD. Cues, Cluster 3 to 6 main points of lecture, use teacher cues to record ideas, enter important vocabulary, and summarize quickly and whenever possible, is a note-taking strategy, validated especially for use in middle school science classes. It can also be used in other courses and for other grade levels. When employing this learning strategy, it is helpful to create your own notes ahead of the lecture. It is also much better to shorten lectures into sections, especially when first beginning to use the strategy in class. And once again, it is also helpful to post cues, steps, somewhere visible to all students. Regular notes evaluations are also important to the strategy and can be done using self, peer, or teacher assessment. Self-checking notes can also lead to further student self-determination, and peer-checking notes is a good way to promote teamwork and communication. Moving along right into writing strategies, it's important to know that the instruction strategies for independent learning in writing are a little bit different than the other learning strategies. The steps of the method of instruction for writing strategies include develop it, discuss it, model it, memorize it, support it, and practice it. So they're very, very similar but slightly different. And this process is called self-regulated strategy development, and that process has an extensive research base. Using SRSD, teachers can teach students the TREE and POW practices designed to increase student writing competence. POW and TREE can be used for any writing assignment, persuasive, informative, or narrative. POW, pick idea, organize notes, write, and say more. And TREE, topic, sentence, reasons, explain reasons, and ending. And POW and TREE can also be used at the same time to work together. There are also two important editing strategies that can be used for students. TAG, tell what you like, ask questions, and give suggestions, is a good writing strategy for peer review. And COPS, have I capitalized first words? How is the overall appearance? Have I used end punctuation, commas, and semicolons? And do words look like they are spelled correctly? Is a good strategy students can use when editing their own work. COPS has been shown to be effective, but this strategy also requires pre-skills to be performed adequately. Solving and math strategies. Math may not be as common in different areas of education, but they can be used in classes such as science, and these strategies can be employed at the right opportunities. To comply with today's standards, more math classes are focusing on problem solving, and one way teachers do this is by focusing on word problems. STAR, search word problem, translate word problem, answer problem, and review question or solution, is the best strategy for students learning how to do word problems, and it can also be used in algebra. LAMPS is a learning strategy to aid students in remembering the steps in regrouping or carrying an addition. Line up numbers, add right column and ask more than 9. If so, put ones in below column and then send the 10s to the top of the next column. And SLOBS is an aid for remembering how to borrow and subtraction. Smaller, follow steps. Larger, lead to subtraction. O is cross off number in next column. Borrow by taking 110 and adding to the next column and then subtract. FOIL may be a learning strategy technique that more teachers are familiar with because that strategy is likely to have been encountered in high school or maybe even college. Certainly, it could be a good one for older students with and without disabilities to learn when coming into algebra classes. FOIL is used for multiplying binomials. First, outside, inside, last. Time and resource strategies. A lack of organization is a common characteristic in children with disabilities. This problem increases as the child gets older simply because the workload into middle and high school steadily increases. Larger class sizes and lesser supervision also plays a part in children with disabilities struggling with organization into middle and high school. HOPS can increase organization skills, decrease homework problems, reduce academic problems, and even increase GPA. It also utilizes a reward system with the eventual goal of transferring the program over to parents if feasible. HOP stands for Homework Organization and Planning Program. There's also a wide variety of technological applications to assist in students' time and resource management skills. Teachers ensure students learn and utilize strategies. Teachers can teach self-instruction, self-questioning, and self-monitoring to their students. Self-instruction has been used to successfully teach students strategies for math, test taking, reading comprehension, and writing. Self-questioning, in theory, should allow children to guide their own behavior by asking themselves questions so that they do not always need an adult present to perform. And self-monitoring is an excellent way to check for student use of learning strategies because students must note their use of learning strategies, which strategy they used, and when. Here's my source.